Okay, so today we are looking at the R7 network streamer and then some from China's FiiO. And we have a lot to talk about today. And therefore I'm going to be signposting some key findings that I will call headlines along the way.
This episode is brought to you by Primare's new SPA25 Prisma, the home cinema integrated amplifier designed for both music and movies. Go to primare.net for more information.
Welcome back, everybody. Yes, what FiiO have essentially done with the R7 is they've taken a mobile phone, an Android mobile phone, they've dialed back the operating system to Android 10, and no, it is not janky, not one bit. And then they've taken away the camera, they've taken away the SIM card slot and any phone call capabilities. And then they've built it out to run on mains power. But there's also a DC input on the back for people, and you know who you are, who like to mess around with third-party power supplies. But as we shall see, the R7 is far more than just a DAP in a box. I see it as a touchscreen enabled network streamer with a very powerful headphone amplifier on board. And that brings us to our first headline. Headline number one is that the R7's color touch display is not just for menu navigation and artwork and song and album information. It does far more than that. And that's because the FiiO R7 works just like an Android mobile phone. Obviously, as I've just said, without the camera, without the phone call capabilities. But what it does give us access to is the Google Play Store. There's a Google Play Store app inside, and that allows us to install any streaming service app available to the Google Play Store, which is pretty much every streaming service on the planet. So right out of the box, I installed Spotify, SoundCloud, Tidal, and PlexAmp. And FiiO has also pre-installed, so it's there when you power it on for the first time, it's also pre-installed its own Roon Ready app. Now don't be confused by this. This is just for Roon Ready playback so that it can play catch on streams. It is not the same as the Roon Remote app, in that with the FiiO Roon app, we can't browse our library and choose songs and things like that. We have to use the Roon Remote app for that, and obviously we can download that from the Google Play Store, no problem. And then we have essentially two Roon apps running on the R7. One to play catch on the streams, and then one for library navigation, and anything you can do with Roon on a smartphone, you can do on the R7 itself. And that goes for Spotify, Tidal, PlexAmp, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Deezer, like any streaming service that you can possibly imagine. Now I realize that Roon is quite expensive and not everybody wants to spend that kind of money to be able to stream across their home network and also integrate Tidal and Qobuz. If that's you, then you should know about PlexAmp, because PlexAmp talks to a Plex server and it essentially does similar things to Roon for a lot less money. And if we run PlexAmp on the R7, we can, from the comfort of our couch, fire up PlexAmp on our smartphone and then use our smartphone's instance of PlexAmp to control what goes on the R7's instance of PlexAmp. And we can use our smartphone to tell our Plex server what music to stream to the R7. And we can do this streaming obviously over Wi-Fi and Ethernet. And a shout out to FiiO here for not subjecting us to the visual intrusion of one or more Wi-Fi aerials sort of protruding from the back of the unit. But because the R7 runs Android, it makes it really easy for us to turn off Bluetooth. It makes it easy for us to turn off the Wi-Fi aerial as well. This is a network streamer for anybody, for whatever reason, who wants to stream without Wi-Fi active and without Bluetooth active. And another way we can play music on the R7 is from an SD card or from a USB storage device. And FiiO has put slots for both on the back of the unit. So yeah, essentially, in many respects, this does run a bit like a DAP with micro SD cards inserted into the back. But it's an SD card slot, so obviously you'll need an adapter for those micro cards. And access to streaming from local storage comes by way of FiiO's own music playback app, which is plain, it's functional. I haven't really used it very much, to be honest, because I'm more of a streaming service and Rune and Plex kind of person. But it's there if you want it. Now, one of the biggest complaints about streaming digitally on an Android device is the operating system's resampling engine, which essentially, whatever sample rate of the native stream, it goes, no, you're not having that, I'm going to resample everything to 48 kilohertz. Now, what FiiO have done is they've routed most of the app's signals around that Android operating system resampler, so most streams in most cases are bit perfect. But there's also a DSD upsampling engine that you can turn on from the drop-down menu at the top, and that is for people who like DSD sort of softer, more billowy sound. And I like it on some recordings, but not others. But that's the beauty of it. You can turn it on and off at will. Now, the DAC inside the FiiO R7 is built around a chip from ESS, which is very common nowadays. And you can also access that DA conversion circuit from the Toslink and the coax inputs on the back. And if you don't happen to like the sound of the FiiO's internal DAC, you can bypass it, you can add an external DAC, and then just pipe the signal out, either using the Toslink out or the coax out, also on the back panel. But if we do want to use the internal DAC, there are 6 ways to get analog audio out of the R7. So on the back panel, there are 2 sets of RCA sockets, so single-ended outputs. There's a set of balanced XLR outputs, and I use those in Berlin to connect the R7 to an NAD Masters M23 power amplifier. Yes, the R7 can be used as a pre-amplifier, obviously with a power amplifier, and connected to a loudspeaker hi-fi system. It has the sound that many people attribute to modern Class D amplifiers. So that's that kind of highly transparent sound. So this is a DAC in balance mode that sounds very detailed and offers a great deal of clarity. And it's also tremendous with layer separation in pulling apart the strands of music. And this high degree of transparency and deep dive detail retrieval is perhaps even more evident when we connect headphones to the R7, especially the balance connectors. They're all on the front behind a little pull-off, I guess, protective cover. And there we find a 1/4 inch socket, so single-ended, and then balanced Pentacon and balanced XLR. And from those balanced outputs, we get up to 3 watts into 32 ohms. And if that sounds like a lot of output power to you, it is. But thankfully, FiiO have very carefully implemented 4 different gain levels, which can be adjusted inside the operating system, inside the Android operating system. And the lowest gain level is there for connecting highly sensitive IEMs like the Campfire Audio Andromeda. I tried those very briefly, didn't hear any hiss or hum or anything like that. So this is a unit that's good for power hungry headphones, but also very sensitive IEMs, which don't need a lot of power at all. Talking of gain, any volume sliders that we have in our streaming apps are connected to the volume display and also the touch screen control of that display on the R7, and also the rotary on the side, the volume rotary on the side. All of those volume controls are interconnected, and the other front panel rotary allows us to operate the R7 in preamp mode and headphone mode, or both at the same time. And there's even a mode for line out operation when we're using it just as a streaming DAC. But thankfully, to save our ears and our headphones and our speakers, FiiO has implemented a warning when you engage line out mode. It's like, are you sure you want to do this? And if you turn away again, that warning disappears. That's a really nice, but I would say pretty damn essential touch from FiiO there. Now, regular viewers will realize that I am recording this video in my apartment in Lisbon, but I brought the R7 with me from Berlin on the plane. I managed to pad it out in my suitcase so it didn't get damaged at all. And when I first got here, I connected the R7 using its balance sockets on the back to a pair of Buchart A700 loudspeakers, which meant that I could then wave goodbye to the Weiser-enabled Platin hub. Now, I know some of you will want to know, did the sound change from swapping out the Platin hub's Weiser feed to each loudspeaker to the R7? Well, not that I could immediately tell. Maybe over the course of listening to that setup, I guess over a week, I could possibly guess that the FiiO sound was just a little bit more laid back than the Platin hubs and maybe a little bit less crisp fried at the edges. But the biggest differences between the Platin hub and the R7 are quite plainly functional. So in using the R7, we forego the Platin hub's HDMI eARC input, we forego its room correction smarts. And I had to then hook up my TV to the R7 using its Toslink input like an animal. But in doing so, I gained high-end headphone listening and Plex streaming. And the R7 also allowed me to hardwire in a little Project CD transport device and without the Platin hub's Weiser air gap. But bringing the R7 to Portugal and setting it up anew made me realize, I think, more clearly another key advantage of the R7 as a network streamer over, say, the Bluesounds and other network streamers like it. In that, and this is another headline, I guess this is headline number 4, the on-screen keyboard that pops up allows us to, it just makes it easier to set this device up. So when we want to onboard it onto our Wi-Fi network, it's just like it is on a mobile phone, an Android phone. It's super easy to set up. It's super easy to configure because the drop-down menus, again, are just like an Android phone. They make it easier for us to adjust, say, the screen brightness or tweak the display or the clock, things like that. It's much more intuitive for newcomers. I think somebody in a recent video asked me if I still use Qobuz, and the answer is no, because I swapped it out for Apple Music and its tvOS app way back in 2021 because I like navigating the Apple Music library with my TV, just having a big display. And I also prefer Apple Music's smartphone interface to Qobuz. And with the R7 set up here, I finally got around to installing Apple Music on it from the Google Play Store to make sure that the app works in the same way that it does on my smartphone. And it absolutely does. It's exactly the same. But the upshot of all of this is we can stream from Apple Music without the intermediary step of using AirPlay or Chromecast. And this also includes being able to offline content because the FiiO R7 gives us 64 gigs of internal memory to play with. So we can offline music on Apple Music just as we would do on our phone, which is, I guess, really useful in case your internet goes out. So that brings us to headline number 5, in that not only can we run any streaming app, we can offline content to any streaming app. And I don't know of many other network streamers that allow us to do this. Now we come to two things I don't like about the R7. The first relates to the remote control. It's called the RM3. It's a Bluetooth remote. I'm holding it up here because we didn't shoot any B-roll of it because it only arrived a few days ago. And that's because I had to buy this separately. This does not come in the box with the R7. And then the second thing that I guess is a bit of a niggle with the R7 is that we have to activate apps when we want to use them. They're not always running in the background. So if we want to stream Roon to the R7, we have to activate the FiiO Roon Ready app. And if we want to stream Tidal, we have to fire up the Tidal app and actually engage with it directly because there's no Tidal Connect here. Because remember, Tidal Connect only relates to certified streaming devices and not from one instance of Tidal to another instance of Tidal as it works with Spotify Connect. Man, this shit gets complicated pretty quickly, doesn't it? However, having said that, FiiO was smart enough to program this remote control, the RM3, so that you can navigate the apps on the home screen as if they were different panes. You can scroll across them. Again, no B-roll because this arrived too late. So that's pretty useful, but also you can put it into, there's a little mouse button on here. You can put it into mouse mode and use this a bit like a Wii controller. And I guess that's really only for people who have steady hands. You can move it and like move a little mouse pointer and then click things with that. It's not ideal for most people, but the basic sort of navigation buttons here, perfect. So you can start up Roon or Tidal or Spotify from the comfort of your couch. But I guess that comes with the caveat that if you actually want to play something on Apple Music or on Tidal, you then have to get up and go over to the unit and then navigate and tell it what you want to play. Now, since making the two videos about the Bluesound NODE X, and during that time, I've put in at least another 20 hours on side-by-side listening between the R7 running as a streaming DAC and the Bluesound NODE X running as a streaming DAC. So yeah, a side-by-side comparison. And I used the same playlist of songs that was introduced in that NODE X video. And I used the same hardware. So basically a pair of Zoosol 6 loudspeakers powered by an Enleum AMP-23R integrated amplifier. Now from the FiiO, I hear fuller sounding bass guitar sounds. That's on the Grace Jones Slave to the Rhythm 12-inch mix. But the percussion on that track, I think the Node pulls it out more effectively, the NODE X that is. So we get more sort of dynamic bounce and a little bit more air from the Bluesound device. And that extra air also lends the Bluesound a little bit more treble finesse than we hear from the FiiO, which by contrast sounds sometimes a little bit stunted, or maybe it lacks the last ounce of clarity in the uppermost frequencies that the NODE X gives us. And just considered as a streaming DAC, I think the NODE X takes it, but only just. But if your hi-fi system demands XLR connectivity, then really you have Hobson's choice, and it has to be the FiiO R7. But when we move over to headphone listening, the tables turn just a little in favor of the FiiO, but only when really, I guess, we use the FiiO's balanced outputs, because those balanced outputs seem to offer more drive, or they lend more drive or more forward momentum to music than the NODE X. And they also offer sort of more wide-eyed separation than the NODE X can muster from its 1/4-inch socket. Now I realize that's not an apples to apples comparison. Of course I realize that, but I'm trying to basically compare the best of what we can get from the FiiO device and the best of what we can get from the Bluesound device, right? But I think that their overall tonal balance is more similar than it is different, even though I think the NODE X adds a little bit more treble shimmer. Now, in order to consider why this might be, we have to look at the headphone amplifiers inside each device, because both of them use a THX AAA amplifier circuit. Now the FiiO uses a more powerful model, and it comes with I guess they buy an off-the-shelf circuit board from THX or their supplier, and it has a headphone output driver section on the board, and there's also a power supply section on that board. But Bluesound didn't do that. They went for a less powerful THX AAA board, and then they had to build in their own power supply. So that might be one reason why these two devices from their headphone outputs sound similar but also different, and one reason why one is far more powerful than the other. Because if you have power hungry headphones, you definitely want the FiiO here. Now with the headphones that I have here that I use for this testing, I prefer the NODE X with the final D8000 Pro headphones, because they already have quite enough bass weight and shove, thank you very much, but they could do with a little bit of an extra sparkle up top. And I also prefer the NODE X with Campfire Audio's Trifecta IEMs, which are 3 dynamic drivers built into one earpiece. But the opposite is true when I move over to the Meze 109 Pro. They already have plenty of sparkle up top, and they could do with a little bit of extra weight down below. And that's where I prefer the FiiO R7. And I also prefer the extra bass wallop that the FiiO device gives us with the Campfire Andromeda. So yeah, separating these two devices on sound quality alone is not an easy task, not at all. I think that I could live with either. And I would probably go with the R7 if I wasn't planning to integrate a sub, because there's no subwoofer output on the back of the R7 and there is on the back of the Node. But I just really wish that FiiO had put an HDMI eARC socket on the back of their streamer. Perhaps maybe when they do version 2 they'll consider that. But the FiiO is mainly for people who want a different kind of network streaming experience. It's for people maybe who use DAPs on a regular basis and insert micro SD cards into the bottom of their DAP. So they've got a bunch of micro SD cards lying around that they could easily just pop into the back of the R7 and be up and running with music in a matter of minutes. But also just to have Apple Music run natively on their network streamer and being able to kind of interface with it as you would with a phone. And it's also for Plex users like me who want to use PlexAmp as a remote streaming endpoint on their network and then use their smartphone to tell the Plex server what to send to that streaming endpoint. I don't know of any other affordable, commercially available network streamer that right now you can do this with. I don't think it's available. You can do it on a Raspberry Pi based streamer, yes, but that's a major ball ache to install actually. So the FiiO device makes it really easy, just a couple of clicks and you're up and running with PlexAmp streaming, no problem. But the FiiO is also for SoundCloud streamers, for Mixcloud streamers, for Deezer users, even for Qobuz users still waiting for Qobuz to develop their own version of Qobuz Connect. So yeah, like I said at the beginning of this video, there is a lot to talk about with the R7, and I've probably missed some key things that you want to know about. So there's a high probability that I'm going to make a follow-up video where I tackle some of your questions that you will leave in the comment section below and also on Patreon as well. So yeah, I want to make a sort of Dear John video about this product because there's just so much to cover. And even in this very long video, it just ain't possible for me to kind of just tick them all off. So yeah, if you have a question or a comment, please leave it below and I'll try and get to it, but there's no guarantee, but I'll try and get to it in the next video. But if you like this video, then please consider giving us a like down below. If you like my attitude towards network streamers and the fact that not all of them have to be these sort of like passive, I won't call them dumb boxes, but basically boxes without a screen. If you like the fact that I'm now embracing network streamers that have touchscreens on the front, I really do think that Android streamers with touchscreens hold a very bright future in this sort of sub-segment of the hi-fi or the home audio space. So if you dig all of that, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Hello, me again. You're watching this video on YouTube, but if you were watching it on Patreon right now, you would be what? Hello, me again. You're watching this video on YouTube, but if you were watching it on Patreon right now, you would be watching a series of bloopers right here instead of me talking to you about this very thing, which is very meta, isn't it? So yeah, I would love it if you would consider supporting this channel by, just signing up for Patreon, even if it's just for 1 month, just to buy me a cup of coffee or something. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.